exactly what we have in the European Union, because this has been an ongoing construction for decades. People died in the making of this European Union, particularly in
willpower, fueled by packets of Haribo and sealed following a visit to the chip shop. We found an agreement that enshrines the United Kingdom's special status as a country never joining the euro and never joining Schengen, as a country that does not wish to be part of
it is the British people who are deciding, and that the British politicians are taking position. And I can tell you one thing, if there is one party in the UK who's going to fight that Britain remain in the Union, it's going to be the Liberal Democratic movement, and them alone.
To its laws, future generations, a generation of the British decided to join the European Union. That generation can now not impose on European institutions.
The new settlement promised to us in 2013 by David Cameron has been ditched. Our sovereignty will continue to be eroded and our security will continue to be at risk. We will continue to send billions.
Is another example. Here we have our own nationalists and populists, from Madame Le Pen to Mélenchon. I don't see the difference from time to time. And they all preach one thing, a false sense of security. They believe that with walls and fences we can solve the problem, that we can keep problems outside our territories. With walls and fences they solve every problem. Migration problem is solved with that, climate change is solved with that, every problem they solve with walls and fences. And I think it's wrong how you keep climate change outside your borders. With fences, with walls? How you keep terrorists outside your borders with national walls or fences, or with a European policy instead? And how you deal, for example, with tax evasion and with offshoring. You can only do that with supranational policies and supranational instruments in the future. But it's true, I believe that the discontent, the fear, the anger of our citizens is caused by this fracture. A fracture that is that on the one hand we have globalization of our world, and on the other hand democratic policies were still only in fact being developed on a national, a local level. And it is, in my opinion, this imbalance that was the basis also for the financial crisis in 2008, because the markets were global and our policies were not. And it is also there where you find our weakness of Europe, faced with Putin, faced with autocrats like Erdogan and so on. So I think if you want really to give a positive response to the fears of our citizens and to regain control over their lives, we need European solutions and European capacities the fastest as possible. And that does not mean abolishing national democracy. It means complementing them. And that means, at the same time, in my opinion, you could say that in one word, Europe is not the source, but is the counterweight for wild and uncontrolled globalization. And at the same time, Europe is also the cure against the cancer of nationalism that we have today in Europe. And so, that is, in my opinion, the right analysis to make. And I think that you have responded to that with a list of concrete proposals. And I see three essential proposals in that. First of all, this European Defence Union. I should say, finally, is the third attempt, Mr. Juncker. The first time in '54, refused by the French National Assembly. Let's not talk about that. It's good that France now is coming back to their mistake of '54. We did a new attempt in 2003. You remember that. And we failed also. Now I'm very pleased with the proposals already backed by the Hungarian and the Polish governments. So let's do it, because let's be honest to each other, it are not longer the Americans who will take responsibility in our neighbourhood. We shall do it ourselves, or it shall not be done in our neighbourhood. And secondly, certainly if Trump is elected, I don't make me any illusion about this unwillingness from their side to do something. Secondly, a good real governance for the euro and the economy. Let's be honest, we cannot continue, Gianni and Manfred, like we are doing now. The Stability and Growth Pact, you say, yeah, we have to apply it, and then Gianni stands up saying, no, we don't apply it. And the reality is that that's the reality today. France have a Stability Pact, but they say it's no problem, the Stability Pact, we don't apply it. And you have Germany on the other hand, but we have still the Stability Pact, even when we don't apply it. That's the reality of today. We have to change it. And I encourage you, Mr. Juncker, to push forward the 5 Presidents' report with the Treasury, with the Minister of Finance, with the fiscal capacity in the Eurozone, with the Convergence Code, the fastest as possible, because this little game with the Stability Pact cannot continue anymore. We lose any credibility towards the outside world. And the last point, I think, is in fact a common migration and asylum policy, the fastest as possible. Have we the possibility to create this, to do this achievement? Have we the courage to do it? I think the environment is there, because let's look to Brexit.
We don't take those seriously, our negotiations on TTIP, etc. And if we don't defend them and show commitment to further develop them, then we're going to lose the trust even further of our citizens. Thank you very much indeed.
Das Wort hat jetzt für die EFDD.
And now for the FDD, the floor goes to Mr. Farage.
Thank you. This annual tradition of the State of the Union speech was of course started by your predecessor, Mr. Barroso, and perhaps now is a good opportunity. I'm sure the whole House would like to join me in congratulating Mr. Barroso on his new highly paid job at Goldman Sachs. Isn't it all wonderful? Isn't it? So whatever happens, Mr. Juncker, the big boys, I'm sure, will look after you. Having listened to what you've said this morning, all I can say is I'm pleased we voted to leave. It is clear there are no lessons that are going to be learned from Brexit. Indeed, it was the usual recipe, more Europe, and in this particular case, of course, more military Europe, a European army, a common defence, and already in this House people saying, well, the Americans won't be here anymore, we'll have to stand alone with our own military structures. I don't know about a project of peace. I would have thought this is probably a very dangerous move. And it isn't going to change the rapid growth in opposition parties across the whole of Europe. It isn't going to stop the Central and Eastern European countries from saying no to Mrs. Merkel's migrant quotas, and I think you've got a lot more referendums to look forward to. But in terms of Brexit, well, you're probably right to be slightly critical of the British government, who, I agree, ought to get on with it. But it's pretty clear that the EU is getting on with it, and you have already appointed your divorce lawyers. And on behalf of the European Parliament, we've got Guy Verhofstadt. He's the man who's going to be negotiating Brexit. And if you were to think of this building as a temple, well, Mr. Verhofstadt is the high priest, a fanatic. In fact, there is only one real nationalist in the room, and it's you, because you want flags, anthems, armies. You are an EU nationalist, and I frankly think that this appointment amounts to pretty much a declaration of war on any sensible negotiating process. If you stick to the dogma of saying that for tariff-free access, to reciprocal tariff-free access with the single market, we must maintain the free movement of people, then you will inevitably drive us towards no deal. No deal and trading on WTO rules. For the United Kingdom, that actually isn't too bad, because it's very much better and cheaper than the current deal we've got. But for hundreds of thousands of German car workers and French wine producers, potentially it's very bad news, because we are their biggest market, who they trade with most profitably in the world. And I would argue that what we really need, is to have a sensible, common sense approach, and for this Parliament to recognise that it's made a mistake, and to find somebody who actually likes the United Kingdom to lead these talks. Thank you.
Das Wort hat jetzt für die
And now the floor goes to Madame Le Pen.
Well, Mr. Juncker, quite rarely have we seen such an insipid and faulty speech. This is basically almost like a funeral for the European Union. But perhaps we should admit that there was a very good point of humor where you said that you were the hero of the combating fiscal optimization for multinationals. But really, you haven't been paying attention to the ambition of people in the European Union to reestablish and retake their sovereignty and their independence. We need to, I mean, if you want to see what young people are thinking, Mr. Weber, don't read the newspaper, listen to the young people. And if